Welcome back, everybody. This Week in America, our website, thisweekinamerica.us. As mentioned, our special guest on the program is Hollis Hughes. He's an author. He's also a retired educator and businessman. Retired educator, both a teacher and a counselor. He's written several books, and we're talking about a novel that he's written called The Lingering Cloud. It's a novel. Our author and guest is Hollis Hughes. The book has been described as an elegant, tenderly written story of love and loss. Hollis, welcome to This Week in America. Great to have you with us on the program.
Well, thank you very much, Rick. It's a pleasure to be on.
Enjoy reading the book, and I want to talk about your background because it's fascinating. Let's go back to the early days, and we'll talk about what it was like and where you got this desire to read and eventually to be able to write as well. You grew up in an isolated rural area. Talk about what that was like and the family that you grew up with.
Where I lived, you could see no one else's house from any vantage point in the yard. We were poor like everybody else. It was a Great Depression. I was born February 25, 1928. The crash came October 29, the final crash of the following year, 29. My first permanent memory was late August or September in 1930. So I remember most of the Depression. I heard my parents talk about it. I'm writing a book now on the Great Depression. It'll be different from anything anybody's ever seen. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, it's interesting because I'd like to talk about what the family went through. I know you grew your own food on the farm, and I understand that because of that, you were able to get through. How difficult was it as the family to pull through during that period?
Well, we were short of money. We had plenty of food. We probably ate the same thing today that we ate yesterday and the day before. I recall one time I had wonderful beefsteak for breakfast every day for a month. Can you imagine that?
Wow, yes. Hollis Hughes is our guest on This Week in America. The book he's written is called The Lingering Cloud, a novel. The book is available at Amazon. Information available at our website, thisweekinamerica.us. What you did have growing up, and you mentioned poor in the sense of money, but it was a loving family, and your mother really gave you the gift of books, the gift of reading. Talk about how important, because you're there on the farm going through this very tough period, but because of books, it really transported you to other areas, other lives.
Oh, she read to us almost every night, and we would beg her to read way on into the night. Generally, she couldn't, but she was a wonderful reader. She could also write. She was a published poet and short story writer in a national publication. So I guess I inherited my writing ability from her.
Well, and that led to really a love for school. And sometimes children at that age, they tolerate school, they don't love school. You really liked that whole learning process, didn't you? It was fun for you.
Yes, I had a good vocabulary before I was reading, and that really helped. I'd see words that I'd never seen in print before, but I knew what they were as a rule. So I was reading regular novels in the fourth grade.
That love of reading actually helped you in college. When at age 18 you go off to Athens College, you paid your room and board, tuition, but by working in the college library. So you actually got to read your way through college, sort of, by being in an atmosphere that you really enjoyed.
Oh, yes, I loved it. My boss wanted me to go study library science in graduate school, but I had become so interested in psychology, in particular schizophrenia, by the time I was 21 or 2 years old. And it was already reading. I had all the reading material I wanted. I read philosophy, psychology. Sometimes my GPA average suffered a bit, because of my extra reading, but what the heck, I wanted an education.
Well, you got the education and you were able to enjoy it as you went through that process. Too often, for people, it's a struggle where they're like, wow, I can't wait to finish this. You obviously look forward to the new day and to a new day and to learning something. And I want to talk about the teaching, because you felt like, okay, this is a way that I can take the gift that I have learned and use this gift in spreading it to others. And what you started teaching, a few months even before your graduation, I understand.
Yes, I finished my coursework by the end of February in 1950, and I found the job within 10 or 12 days teaching school. And the school that I went to from grades 1 through 8, in fact. My first grade teacher was still teaching at the school. It was a wonderful place to work. A great school. The standards at this little country school were very high. We were about a couple of years above the national average on standardized tests.
Well, I mentioned in the beginning that you were a counselor as well, and you've said that being a counselor was important, and you went through that yourself, and you could have looked for a counselor to give you some guidance as you were going through. How important was that role to be there and to actually not just teach the kids, but actually give them some guidance?
Yes, there was no one to guide me about getting into what college. Uh, Fortunately, a guest speaker came by and talked to seniors who had a work study program, and I didn't have money, but I had all the help I needed to get through college. I think I owed $150 to pay off a debt, and where I borrowed a little money to go to school, and that was it. The rest of it I worked out.
It's an amazing story. The book is Lingering Cloud. That's a novel written by Hollis Hughes. As I say, been described as an elegant, tenderly written story of love and loss, and we'll talk about that in a second. It's interesting, all of the background that Hollis has been through, and that all comes together in the novels that he has written, including The Lingering Cloud. I mentioned in the beginning, businessman, but a trip to Mobile really changed your life and expanded it, and you fell in love with the azaleas, the camellias, the rhododendron. It really started a business for you.
Yes, actually, the rhododendrons were discovered in North Carolina, and I decided I was going to grow them come hell or high water, because I'd been told that you couldn't grow them where I lived. The summers were too steamy and hot. But I grew them. I was hard-headed, I guess. I grew them anyway. I tried about 100 different varieties and ended up keeping 20 that were worth growing. And I rooted them and took care of them until they were ready for market.
So being stubborn really worked out for you. It actually,
oh, yeah.
the challenge that you can't do that, and you're like, yeah, well, watch me. And suddenly that became a thriving business for you. Hollis Hughes, our guest on the program. You went through a very difficult time with your wife, Janet, caring for her. And during the advanced stage of her illness, you started writing your first novel. Talk about that period, and then we'll talk about The Lingering Cloud.
Okay. When I was taking care of her and she got to the diaper stage with Alzheimer's, I would check her every 3 hours to see if she needed a fresh diaper. And I'd take her to the bathroom and wait and do whatever I need to do. And then I would go back and write a little. And my first novel has had some very positive reviews. Is still available. But taking care of her, just it was full-time job.
Yes, and the book that Hollis...
Alzheimer's is not bad for the person who has it after they reach a certain point. The brain, Rick, is just dying a little at a time, a little at a time. And the brain of an advanced Alzheimer's patient doesn't look anything like a normal brain. Uh, Dead brain cells have to be flushed out. And once a person loses the ability to do something, it's never going to come back.
The
You
book,
realize that?
yeah, it was a really painful time for you to go through during the period with your wife, Janet. The book that Hollis was talking about, his first novel written during the later stages, advanced stages, is called Mindful of Him. Again, that's available at Amazon. If you go to our website, thisweekinamerica.us, you can link on to Amazon to get information on Hollis's book. The second novel, The Lingering Cloud, that's what we're talking about on the program. And you were, 85 years old when you wrote this?
Yes.
And you said this was a book that you couldn't have written 10 years earlier. The time was right at 85 with your experiences in life to write this book.
Yes, sir. I tried writing it when I was about 72 or 3, pardon me. And 10 years earlier, I couldn't write. I wrote something. I'd be embarrassed if someone saw what I wrote. I went back and looked at it after I had about 10 more years to mature, and I said, I can't believe I wrote that. But I did. So I felt ready to write this novel.
It has received excellent reviews. The book is called The Lingering Cloud. You've been praised as a storyteller, a crafter of characters, description of the outdoors, a story of love and loss. It's the story of newlyweds Mack and Rebecca Baldwin. Set the book up for us. Talk a little bit about the Baldwins and that relationship.
Yes, Mack Baldwin was a preacher, a young preacher. He married, and on the night of his wedding, he discovered that he had a wife who was in the early stage of schizophrenia. And the marriage was never consummated. Yet he remained faithful to her for years. After 16 months, the psychiatrist suggested institutionalization, and she lived there in the state mental hospital until Alzheimer's showed up. And there was a few dentists thought that Alzheimer's might be connected with the mercury coming from dental amalgams, but they weren't sure. And I didn't go into that a great deal, but it was mentioned. She had all of her teeth removed, and she was eating pureed food anyway, and she eventually spent the rest of her life, several years, in a nursing home.
And during this period, you mentioned that Mack was a pastor. He had a moral lapse, blindsided by temptation. Talk about that, because it's interesting the way you develop this, that he knew that God had forgiven him, yet he was struggling with forgiving himself.
He got a call from a young bereaved widow whose husband, he had preached a funeral for the husband a day or two before. She called. He expected family members to be there, but an out-of-state emergency had called them back home. She was alone. He knew he should call to get somebody to come as a chaperone, but he didn't. The woman wanted to talk. Neither one of them realized that a death can create a sex urge. Now, I don't know whether you're familiar with that or not.
Yes.
But it can. And one thing after another happened, and she was crying and just wanted to be hugged. And right there, things got out of hand. And he prayed to God to forgive him, but he never could forgive himself. He knew he should have gotten out of there when he could have.
Yes.
And he blamed a lot about the book. He blamed himself. My wife says I'm giving a lot about the book, but I think it'll be interesting.
Yes, it certainly will be. The book is called The Lingering Cloud. And it's one of the novels written by Hollis Hughes. A few minutes left in the program, and we're having Hollis back and talking about Mindful of Him and the book he's working on that I'm looking forward to, Memories of the Great Depression, which he says is different than other books of that era, and we'll talk about that. If you're watching the YouTube version, we've got a copy of the book that you will see there. The book is, once again, The Lingering Cloud, and we'll have a link for that at Amazon on our website, thisweekinamerica.us. Hollis, a couple minutes left in the program. I want to talk just a little bit about the process you went through in writing this. Was this a story that you knew the beginning, middle, and end as you started it, or did the story sort of take you in different directions once you began?
It somewhat in different directions after I began. I knew I was going to write about schizophrenia. I had had an interest in it for a long, long time. I interviewed 2 psychiatrists for information, and each of them, like I felt that the movement toward removing them from state hospitals should never have happened, that we end up with a lot of people living on the streets.
Yes.
And I'm sure you're aware of that. Probably half of those who living on the streets have mental problems. And there's nobody to see they take their medication. It's very worrisome. It worried each of the psychiatrists I talked to about it.
It is really, and that's why the book is, it's a very good read. It gives you some things to think about as you're reading the book. The book is called The Lingering Cloud, a novel. Hollis Hughes, the author, and our guest on the program, been described as an elegant, tenderly written story of love and loss. He's an excellent storyteller, developer of characters. We'll have Hollis back on another program and talk about his other books, Mindful of Him, and the book he's working on now, Memories of the Great Depression. Hollis, it's been a pleasure to have you on the program. Thank you so much for sharing some time with us. And once again, the book is called The Lingering Cloud. Thank you for being with us. Look forward to having you back on the program.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. I'd love to be back sometime.
It is our pleasure, and you can get information on Hollis and his book at our website, thisweekinamerica.us.